Hello, welcome to Paint by Blunders, and today we are looking at the Warriors of Rohan from the War of the Rohirrim box. These little guys I wanted to do in such a way that was almost speed painting, so I will be taking advantage of contrast paints to help us get, to the end result a little bit quicker, but also with a few classic touches, layering and washes and using pigment powders, etc. If you're new to the channel, do please consider giving us a thumbs up, subscribe. If you've got any tips, tricks, comments on how you painted these guys, please leave them below. It is great to share all these things, and the community is, as always, has been fantastic. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the video. So here they are primed, super simple, zenithal priming. You could do this with a couple of rattle cans or an airbrush, or you could do it as like a heavy slap chop version. I did this with an airbrush just for convenience. So something slightly different. I wanted that more reddy tone for the armor and the leather jackety stuff. So I'm going to add a smidge of magenta ink just to give it that more reddy pinky tone. Now I'm going to knock this right back with some pro acrylic medium, but you could easily just use contrast medium, but essentially mine's run out and I've got loads of the pro acrylic medium. I actually personally prefer the GW medium, but anyway, if you don't want to use magenta ink, you could just use like Doomfire magenta or Bile red and just decant it into like a small mixing pot. I love these little stainless steel ones. Obviously you can see this one is absolutely filthy. I am going 50-50 with medium and a bit of water, because if you use the pro acrylic one, you should always use a little bit of water. And then just a few good drops of magenta ink. Give it a good zhuzh. And then, as always, try to keep a piece of paper or a bit of card anywhere and just test it out. And then that's got just enough of a reddy tone for me, because I really like the reddy sort of oxblood armor from the Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings films. And we're just going to apply this on all over the leather parts, and I would say do the armor as well and see how you like the tone. If you want to make it more red like I do, but you can come back in and you can add a bit of depth later. And again, if you want this leather sections way darker, then just add a second coat essentially. And I normally, if I was doing a squad of these, I would pick a few of them to have 2 coats anyway, because I'm always complaining about this. I don't like it how everyone has the exact same tone, leather jacket, because there's so many variables to make it slightly different in colour. But I also get, we want to get these on the table, so why are we messing around? So as I said, where I wanted it slightly more red, I put a tiny bit of wildwood and a tiny bit of flesh tearers red. I'd say it's 50-50, if not ever so slightly more, 60-40 in favour of the flesh tearers red. Again, we're watering this down by sort of 50%, so 50% contrast mix to a little bit of medium, contrast medium or whatever one you use. And I'm just going around picking out the armour for this, like the boots, the chest plates and the sort of the braces. Now once that's done, I'm going to do another easy win, and that is just use wildwood straight out the pot to go over the belts, the back of the shields. If you've stuck the shields on, no worries, but I try to always use a little bit of museum putty just on the back of the shields, just so I can put them on and take them off as and when I need them. One nice little thing I enjoy doing is with the long spear shafts and the bows, because there's a lot of brown on these models, so I will come in with wildwood, and then while that's still very much wet, just do the end in sort of Black Legion, just so it adds that little bit of darkness shadow tone, where in my head you might have lent that spear in the dirt and it's just got a little bit wet and dark and gammy. So this sort of underlayer of this armour, I'm going to use tusk or fur because it's got that nice pinky reddy tone, and I just think it looks really good as opposed to the standard bright red. I think it contrasts really well against the green that we will be doing and against the slightly red armour. So once that's on, I do come back in with just a bit of Reikland Flesh Shade, or you could add a watered down Agrax, just to tone it down a bit. Because where I'm trying to do this quite quick, I don't want to use loads of different base colours, layer colours. I want to keep it quite simple and save some time with washes. Now, onto the green. I'm using Forest Green from Scale Colour. Essentially, I worked out that I don't have any sort of Games Workshop Dark Angels-y green type colours. I love Scale Colour, but sometimes they can be a bit tricky. So it's not an essential. If you've got any sort of emeraldy forest green, just use that. But I do enjoy Scale Colour. I love the matteness when they dry. And we're going to do 2 thin coats of this because, as you can see, it doesn't have the best coverage. Metallics, nice and easy. I'm just going to use Retributor Armour because it's got a lovely warm tone to it. And I'm going to use Chainmail from Vallejo Game Colour. It's sort of my go-to. I'm sure there's better ones out there, but it's such a non-fuss, effective silver. As always with some of these, you might need to put 2 thin coats on, just trying to avoid some of the areas we've already painted. I'm using a size 1 and a size 2 brush for most of this. With the Retributor Armour, I'm just doing a few accent bits, so the middle of the shield, a few places on the helmet. But you can add as much as you like. So we're going to crack on with the skin and the hair and any sort of handles, etc. And we're going to be using Kislev Flesh for the skin. And I'm going to use a variety of different colours for the hairs, from Xandri Dust to Bane Braid Brown. And I think I've got a warm flesh tone. Because as I said, I like it when there's a bit of a mix, you know, between this rabble. I don't want all of them to be exactly the same. If you wanted to save even more time, you could just pick out some contrast for this. Skeleton Horde will probably give you quite a nice blondie hair tone. Griff Charge Orange, that might, if you want like a gingery tone, I mean, that would be nice as well. And for me, I'm just going around picking up the flights, the hair, the skin, and just picking, you know, either the Bane Braid Brown or the Xandri Dust, because not all the feathers of the birds are going to look the same, etc. And it adds, you know, it adds a little something for me. And when all these are done, I'll pretty much shade these all in with one of 2 shades. It will either be Guilliman Flesh for the skin or Reikland Flesh for the flights as well. For the armour, I'm just going to use Nuln Oil and just cover the chainmail and the helmets, etc. I'm not worried too much about highlighting these afterwards because, as I said, I want to try and get these speed painted a little bit. And one little tip I'd say for this sort of thing, especially with helmets, etc. If you water down your Nuln Oil ever so slightly, I mean, you don't have to cover the entire helmet. You can just go for the creases, but having it slightly thinner will help that, where it will hopefully just run into the creases and avoid the big flat areas. For the skin, Guilliman Flesh is absolutely, or Guilliman, is absolutely fantastic as a contrast paint. I use it all the time for flesh. Again, you could use it straight out of the pot. You could water it down a little bit. That'll give you some different skin tones. Now, we're going to start looking at this green. Now, I'm going to use green shade. I don't know what is it. Coelia? I don't know. I'm going to knock this down by 50% just because it's quite strong. And I'm just going to go around just trying to be careful not to cover the hair, etc. I'm not too worried about the front of the shields. I'm going to just come in with some grey seer later just to pick them out. I'm not too worried about that. As you can see, there's some thin bits of the emerald green from where I did the couple of coats before. I'm not too worried just because I like that lazily, I should say. I quite like it not being completely opaque because to me it looks more like a worn cloak. So like I said, just coming in with grey seer to pick out the fronts of these shields. 2 thin coats just to make it pop, and I'm going to leave them like that. So here they are, sort of super fast, super battle ready. It's borderline sort of slap chop speed painted, but I'm going to come in and just add a few highlights, and I should really do the tops of his arrows. Tusk or flesh, just to highlight that back up again, avoiding the deepest recesses. Also, ice yellow, if you don't own it, get one. It's a great warm pale yellow that you can add to anything, like a creamy tone, and it will just give you that next stage up highlight. I'm a big fan of mixing colours as opposed to just buying another one which is slightly lighter than the last, and I find it really fun. I did a video where I had to paint an orc using only 3 colours, and the tonal variety you can get is amazing. As you can see here, this is just that tusk or flesh with a little bit of ice yellow to give me that highest highlight. For the browns, Mournfang Brown, which is probably my latest favourite brown, and that's a Games Workshop brown. Slightly, watered down on the wet palette. Nothing major. Just picking out those edges again, the highest points. And once again, if you wanted to push it further, tiny bit of ice yellow. You'll be able to keep going with it. I'm personally not going to. If this was a hero, it's definitely the approach I would take. With the greens, we're going to come in with quite thick edge highlights with just that original forest green. And then I'm going to start mixing in a little bit of Lauren Forest 50-50 with the green, just as the next highlight up. And then you could do a final highlight with just the pure Lauren Forest. And the same with any edge highlighting. We're using the belly of the brush and just trying to be nice and smooth. Super fast highlight for the flesh, just coming back in with that Kislev flesh, picking out the fingers, the jawline, cheekbones, just to add a little bit of depth. So for highlighting the hair, I'm using whichever of the Baneblade Brown or the Xandri Dust, and again, tiny bit of ice yellow if you just want to make it pop that little bit more. And honestly, that is it. That is my speed painted Rohirrim warrior. I'm just going to get him base now before I add some pigment powders to make him look a bit more dirty. This is just AK Interactive's Dark Earth. Once that is dry, all I'm going to do is come in and lightly dry brush it with Baneblade Brown, and then dry brush it with a tiny bit of Xandri Dust. So when it comes to pigment powders, I've got a funny little way that I like doing it, and I've just started using matte base from Vallejo, and I'm going to mix this with a little bit of the pigment powder from MIG, and I'm essentially going to make this thin slurry in this little pot, and I will just going to dab it on with an old brush all over the ground and like the bottom of the capes, etc., like they've been trekking and, you know, stalking their prey and just been out in the field for a while. And the matte powder is great because it helps the pigment powder bind to your model, and it just looks good. It doesn't affect the models tonally too much. And if you don't like how thick or thin this is on, you got time with pigment powders. One of the things I like, you've got a bit of time to play around with them and just see how they go. And you know, the bottom of the spear, you know, where he's had it in the dirt, it's picked up a bit of crud, maybe the shield as well. But I think it's just a really effective way to just add a little bit of drama to a pretty, you know, speed painted model. Final lovely little touch, these tiny little grass tufts. They are self-adhesive, but I find the self-adhesion is terrible, so a little bit of super glue and they look great. And then we have it, our little Rohirrims. Super quick, super effective. So that is them. Thank you very much for checking out the video of this little speed painting Rohirrim. There's only 3 in the video because I'm an absolute lemon and I was spraying a mask and it oversprayed and put metallic fleck all over the rest of them, and I didn't have time to correct it before trying to get this video out. Sorry!